This is Support is Sexy, episode 293, with Maxym, founder of 5 Senses Tastings. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I interview inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and their lessons to help you take your business and your life to the next level and create something sexy. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm Elayne, and I'm so happy to have you here because it just would not be the same without you. And if the only thing that's holding you back from telling the world about your business is that you still haven't figured out your brand story, sign up for my free course on how to create your unforgettable brand story at brandstory.tips. So today I'm so excited to welcome our guest, Maxym, and Kala is the founder and CEO of 5 Senses Tastings, a very exquisite business and very unique business where she creates music tastings, which you'll hear all about in this episode. But what I love, Kala talks about the importance of not letting rejection stop you and knowing how to create your own luck when opportunity comes. That's something that we talk about in this episode and something I think we all need to be more aware of. Luck is, as the philosopher Seneca has said, when preparation meets opportunity. So for all of us, being prepared when the opportunity comes and saying yes, that's a key, and Kala talks about that. Saying yes when the opportunity comes, even if it may be before you're completely ready or before you feel like you're completely ready, is very important. So in this conversation with Kala, we talk about that and so much more about her journey from going back and forth, which many of us do, from full-time position to being an entrepreneur, back again, all of the things that go into that and that journey. She's very open about that in here. So thank you, Kala. What you'll also learn from Kala in this episode is heeding the signs when a new business idea may be brewing in you, knowing when to take the leap and turn your side hustle into a full-time hustle, ways to network and make authentic connections rather than just collecting business cards, why learning that something doesn't work or go your way doesn't mean that you failed. And even if you failed, it doesn't mean that it's over, right? Why, as women, it's our duty to stand up for ourselves, and why, for Kala, being a bone marrow donor changed her life forever. So really great conversation. I know you're going to enjoy it. So without further ado, Maxym. So Kala, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Elayne. It's such a pleasure.
Absolutely. So first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
So I was thinking about this, and I think when I made the decision to go into the life of a freelance opera singer, as opposed to following a more standard trajectory in the industry that I was in, that's when it was. So after my first stint I worked for the federal government, and I had kind of a decision to make, was I going to keep going that way and work for the FBI and follow this standard trajectory, or was I going to try and make it as an artist? And that means being on your own. So that's when I first decided to leap in and make that jump into entrepreneurship.
Wow. Now, I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision to go from what most people would probably consider a quote unquote secure job and go into the arts.
No, it was hard. And I've sort of gone in and out of different worlds a couple times in my life. And every time I do, I, re-fall in love with a salary and benefits. Mm-hmm. And then
they're hard to resist.
They so are. And then a couple of years later, I miss that sort of creative life and that life where you're kind of deciding where your next step's going to be. And I leap back into that. So I've come and gone a few times.
Which one do you find most enticing when you're in the other? So do you find that you're really drawn to going back to the arts when you're in the space of a quote unquote secure job? Or do you find when you're in the arts, you really crave that security? Or is it about equal?
It's about equal. I would say I think I'm fairly certain that my soul lives in the arts. So even when I have had those, let's call them office jobs, I still had to, simply to exist, to find outlets for that. But, everything does sort of revolve around money in the end. And so, certainly I do miss the stability of knowing I'll be paid twice a month. The exact same amount.
Right. Now, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Los Angeles?
No, I was actually born and raised in Germany. My father was a classical music conductor, and so my parents had moved to Germany before I was born, and I was raised there for about 14 years. And then I lived in England and Spain, and I moved to the States when I was about 14 years old.
So what was a young Kala like?
Oh, you didn't prepare me for that question. Well, I would say I was like a pretty interesting mix of a deutsches Mädel, so like a little German girl. So I was sort of an expat in Germany because I was American, but I grew up in Germany, and then I came here, and I was an expat here because I'd been born and raised in Germany, even though I was American. So I think I really lived these two very different lives. And remember, this was before, part of my life was in Germany was before the wall fell and before the EU. And so I had this fantastic experience, which, I'm so grateful for, where I got to live in many different worlds as a child. And, we would drive through all these different countries before there was the euro, before everyone spoke English. We had to make sense of different languages and learn to exist and count money in different currencies. And that it was such a part of my childhood that I'm so grateful for. I think it really opened my eyes to be able to kind of see different cultures and figure out how to communicate with people who didn't speak anything I spoke, and not be afraid to kind of step into the unknown, I guess.
And it sounds like it would create a sense of, or foster a sense of adventure too.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, we used to take trips every summer and just drive to Italy and drive to Belgium, and you just did that. That's what we did. And I came to the States every year and saw family, and so yeah, that sort of sense of there were borders then, right? So like every border you crossed was a new little world and a new little adventure and a new language. And, that was a fantastic experience to have as a young child. That was my life.
So did you learn the languages as well? I assume you speak German, but other languages as well?
Yeah, so I was born, raised bilingual in German and English, and when I went to school in England, you had to learn French and one other language, but I already spoke German, so I spoke 4 languages by the time I was 14. So wow. Spanish is added on. Yeah.
You rock! I love it.
Well, I don't speak them all anymore, but I did once.
Did you kind of lose it when you stopped using it regularly, right?
Yeah, so Spanish kind of supplanted German, so now I'm fluent in Spanish, and I sound fluent in German, but I can only talk about horses and ballet and food.
The things that matter.
Yeah, exactly.
So who would you say were some of your greatest influences growing up?
So I'm pretty lucky that a couple of them are hit pretty close to home and are in my family. So I'm sure lots of your listeners say this, or your guests, but it was my mom. So my mom is an incredibly strong person, as happens, your parents split up and we moved to the States, and my mom took 2 teenage girls with her and just set up a life. She just went and did it. And, she had basically was moving back to a country she hadn't been in 20 years, in a new industry that she had educated herself in, and was working on a PhD. And she just made a life for us and didn't complain about it, and made every comfort possible that she could with a limited income. And, now she's an author of a best-selling book and 20 years in her own business and making a wonderful living. And I just look at that and I think she just left an entire life and just went across an ocean and just created a whole other life. And I look at that with great awe all the time. Another woman in my family who I didn't know for my my years growing up is my paternal grandmother, named Lucy. So she actually began her business life in her 50s, and ended up making a company that she was running. She'd taken over from a family member into a sort of a kind of a international company. And she used to sign her letters L. Maxym and not write her full name, because she knew that if she wrote her full name and people figured out that she was a woman, that she would not have the success that she could as a potentially a man. Who knew, right?
Wow. Like J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, exactly. And then if I can go just a bit further into life, I would say another person who has influenced me is the woman to whom I gave bone marrow. So I was very fortunate to be a bone marrow donor 14 years ago about. And I have never met her, though we have spoken, but, I feel this connection with her. And, every time it's sort of this, like, I just think about her every day in some way, that there was some person in the world who was on this earth together with me. And by some amazing luck, I was able to save her life. And that just is the most humbling experience I've ever gone through. And I just always think about that, especially if I'm having a bad day or whatever, I think, I guess I did okay in life. Like that one thing, like that I've got for life. And I think about her every day, and I think about how lucky and humbled I am to have been able to do that. And I carry that sort of intimacy with me every day.
Wow. Now, how did you come about becoming a bone marrow donor?
So what happened was I had been a regular blood donor, but during some year in roughly the turn of the century, doesn't that sound weird to say, they changed the rules, and so I couldn't donate blood anymore. And they asked me if I wanted to join the bone marrow registry. And I said, basically, I have no idea what you're talking about, but sure, I'll do that. And then a couple years later, I don't even remember how they found me, because we didn't have cell phones then. I was called upon to donate. So it was just kind of a matter of someone saying, hey, there's this other thing that you can join, and me saying, okay. Wow. And so now I try to tell everybody about it.
Yeah, I know the issue is very important to you. It's still a part of your work, or what you dedicate time to now. Yes, awareness about it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think most of us misunderstand about either becoming or the necessity of being a bone marrow donor?
What a good question. Well asked. I would say two things. So one, that it is painful. And there are two ways of donating. So one is extraction of bone marrow from the hip, which I understand is fairly painful. That's not what I did. So I did a process called PBSC, or peripheral blood stem cell donation. And that is not really painful. It's uncomfortable, but it doesn't hurt. And then the other thing is, what is the other thing? Well, people don't know that you can donate bone marrow even if you can't donate blood. So let's say that you lived in Africa, or you lived where I did in scary Germany in the 1980s. It's a separate process. So it doesn't mean that you cannot be a bone marrow donor if you are not able to donate blood.
Now, where can people go to find out more information about that, if there are listeners who are interested?
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me share that.
Sure.
So I'm actually on the board, secretary of the board of a foundation in New York City called the Icla da Silva Foundation. So that's icla.org, ICLA.org. There's also the National Be the Marrow Donor Registry. I would say for your listeners, the Icla da Silva Foundation is the largest recruiter for Be the Match, and also the largest minority recruiter. We're always looking for minority donors, and we specialize in that. So anyone who wants more information, head on over there and see what, get a little swab and join the registry.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I'll make sure for everyone listening that I have a link to the organization in your show notes page.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
Absolutely. So tell us now, what did you think growing up, especially with the moving around and going from one country to another? What did you have an idea, I should say, at that time of what you wanted to be when you got older?
Yeah, a couple of things. So I guess for a while I figured my life would be in language of some sort. I mean, I spoke 4 languages. I was moving around all the time and speaking them all the time and singing in them. And I thought maybe I would be a UN interpreter or some sort of mediator for the, Foreign Service or something like that, work for the FBI. So those things were sort of one thing. Always music. I mean, once I started kind of going that way, I thought, maybe I would be an opera singer for the rest of my life. So something about music and language was always there. I didn't have a set goal of being a certain thing, but those music and language were always those things that never left me.
Now, your dad was a conductor, you said, right?
That's right.
So when did you start were you interested in music then from very young because it was always a part of your life, or when did you really become interested in it?
Well, there's this story that that is told in my family that when I was 3, we were walking along the streets in Hannover, which is the city we lived in, and a car screeched to a halt, and I sang out the note, and a diva was born or whatever.
You made the same sound as the car?
Yeah, like on the right pitch and everything.
Wow.
So, I mean, I always sang. I started piano when I was 5. I started the bassoon when I was 10. So I always was a musician, but fast forward to sort of high school and college, I really rejected it for a while. Not the singing part, that I kept going, but I didn't want to be a musician. I wanted to do something sort of brainy and force myself into misery so that I could prove that I was, an intellectual and everything. Mm-hmm. So I ended up studying political science at Barnard, with a musicus minor because I couldn't really give it up.
Right. Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. It's actually what I want to do. But I found that I loved politics and I loved foreign relations and this, this sort of international, cultural diplomacy and all this stuff. I just was completely fascinated by it. And it kind of gave form to this life I had previously as this, girl living kind of on two different continents and in 2 different cultures. So I forgot the question.
We were talking about what you wanted. That's okay. We were talking about your journey to discover what you wanted to be when you got older.
Yeah, well, that was it. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, it was really this moment kind of in my early to mid, when I was around 23, 24, when I had to decide, was I going to kind of really go for it as an artist, as a singer and really try and make it, or was I always going to have it, but it would just be kind of a secondary thing. And I ended up diving into it.
So when did you, after college, did you go into the political science arena, or what did you go into at first?
Yeah, so I graduated and I went to go work for the criminal division of the U.S. Department of Justice. And I was working in an office that handled, in the Latin American Caribbean division of this office that worked on law enforcement training abroad for countries that were coming out of dictatorships and moving into democratization, or moving into democracy, I should say, and trying to figure out how their legal systems needed to shift. And so we would put together these training programs, and I got to go down and be in Venezuela and Barbados and Mexico and Chile and everything, and kind of watch these slow developments as countries were solidifying themselves as democracies and what that meant for their legal systems. So that's what I did for 2 years after college.
For 2 years. And then at what point then did you decide to create 5 Senses Tastings? Was it shortly after that or a little further along your journey?
Well, you're so sweet. I'm a lot older than that. So it was a while later.
It was just a year later. Because you're 23 now.
Yeah, totally. 24. No, so let's see. So after, that was a lot of years later, probably 10 years later, actually, from about 10 years after that. So after I graduated, so then I left and I went back to the government. I left and went to graduate school for opera performance, and then I was an opera singer for about 4 years or so, off and on. And
so then you did decide I'm going to go fully into the arts, right?
Yeah, I did. And, I had a semi-successful career, and by that I mean I was not full-time employed as a singer because that's really hard, but I was singing, in the U.S. and Europe, and I had a stint touring in England and France, and it's great. And then I came back and I started working at this technology company. And it was right about when I started working there and being in this early stage of this startup, which was just so exciting. And everybody was working, every hour that they could. And I was like so invigorated by this world that all of a sudden this idea just sort of like, bing, just sort of came into my head, and it was sort of amorphous at the beginning, and slowly it came into focus. A couple things kind of gelled into place, and I kind of got this idea, and so that kind of happened at the same time.
So what was the idea in the moment? Was it, or what do you think I should say was the catalyst for the idea in the moment? Was it just the environment, or was it something in particular that happened that made you come to this idea that you should start this company?
Well, it was a lot of things. So I'm very certain that being in this environment was definitely important, because it was just like ideas were just flying every moment of every day, and everyone was just, how are we going to build this, and what's it going to look like, and all this stuff. But a couple of things. So, for me, sound, our sense of sound, it's my dominant sense. So many of us have a dominant sense, sight or smell or something. That for me, it's sound. And growing up in 4 different languages on 2 different continents and, many different professional experiences, all of a sudden I found myself in this office where everything was super quiet, right? And nobody would talk, and they would all be in their, their little open plan office with their headphones and their earplugs. And then I would go out into the streets. I was living in New York City at this time, and I would just be like bombarded by this cacophony of sound, right? And then I would go into the practice room, and it would be silent again, or rehearsal, and every note would matter. Every single sound you uttered would be so specific. And so I had this just crazy oral experience every day where I was just kind of going between these universes. And I just started thinking about that a bit more. And at the same time, I was starting to take classes on wine. And I fell in love with this idea of the flight of wine, which for people who might not know the term just means kind of a sampling. You go into a bar and you order a flight of wine. It means you get sort of 4 or 5 1-ounce pours of different types of wines. And I thought, well, I wonder if you could kind of translate that concept of tasting over to music, because throughout my life, being an opera singer, you meet people and they have 2 reactions. One is like, oh my God, that's amazing. I could never do that. Tell me everything. And then other people who kind of scrunch up their nose at you, and they sort of look kind of to the side and they go, oh, I'm sorry, but I hate opera.
They're apologetic about it.
Right? I get it. I've fallen asleep in operas. And so I was thinking, we go through our lives, we're brought up in a certain culture or cultures, whether our parents are from different cultures or we grow up abroad or whatever. And so we have these preconceived notions through our upbringing of what music and food and dress and all that looks like. And okay, we get older, we travel, we see other stuff, but we still have that ingrained in us. And I thought, well, when those people would say that to me, I wanted to say, well, do you hate all opera? Do you really hate all opera? Have you actually heard opera, or are you just saying that because that's what you were told as a kid? And so I just started thinking, I'm as guilty as anybody. Oh, I don't like rap or R&B. Really? Like all of it? That's not true.
Have you really experienced it? Same with opera, right? Right.
So then that's kind of all these, I'm sort of going from one to another, because this is how it was. It wasn't just like this one, actually it wasn't kind of like a light bulb moment. It was all these different things coming around. And then I thought, well, I wonder if you actually gave people a tasting menu of music where they actually got to taste some opera, some country rock, some tango, some flamenco, and a piece of blues, what would they do with that? And that's how that idea of music tasting came to be. And that's sort of how the company started out, was from this idea of this flight of wine becoming this, translating that into a flight of music for people. And, all of it being live music, right? Because piped music, no matter what you do, we're used to just putting music in the background. So my answer to that was, no way. I'm bringing it to the foreground of storytelling. It is where things can start. There are mammals born without eyes, but they can hear. Sound is a primitive, rhythm, sound is primitive to us. And so why do we accept that sound should be in the background? And one of the ways to help that come to the foreground is actually to use, actual humans in the room showing you how that music can be made in the moment.
Wow, that's amazing. I think, do you think I should say that you were in a space at that time where you were open to being inspired by something? So I ask that because I know for some of us, sometimes we get in these even if we're in a place that we like, it sounds like you loved working at the startup, for example. So even if we're in a place that we love, but we might be in a state where we're still looking for some kind of inspiration or want some idea to create something, or just in that kind of space, as opposed to being closed to it and just focused on what you're doing. Do you think you were in a certain kind of space where you were open-minded and those inspirations were able to come in, or were you just going about your way and then noticed all of these different things happening in your life?
I guess I think I was open to it. I don't, one of the things that's sort of vaguely frustrating about when I'm asked about this is I sort of don't remember how it came, so I had come out of this time of, real financial struggle and kind of, coming out of trying to be an opera singer because it just, my voice had changed. The economy was struggling. So a lot of small opera companies were closing and like doors were closing to me and a bunch of my friends, and things were really shifting in the world. And so there was like something closing on my life, but then this completely new weird thing I'd never heard of called localization, and translation. It's a kind of a spin-off, if you will, opened up to me. And so all of a sudden there was this huge new world. And I think being in that completely new place allowed my other love to come at me in maybe a different language. So I was totally open to it, I guess maybe a bit surprised. I'd never thought that I would necessarily do that.
So what would you say was your first step once you decided Five Senses Tastings, even if you didn't have the name at that time? What was your first step to creating the environment that you imagined, that you explained to us?
Well, shortly after incorporating, I put together a test event, and I filled a whole room, like a big room, with people who bought actual tickets to come, and I didn't know all of them. Right.
So, it wasn't all family and friends.
I mean, it was a lot of family and friends, but then there were some people I had never heard of before, and I thought, well, okay, that's a good sign, I guess, right? And people genuinely seemed to love it and gave me feedback that made me realize I was being fairly clear about what I was trying to do. So I did that, and then I just I was working full time, like super full time at the other company, so it kind of was on the back burner for a little bit. And then I just kind of started doing events, and it wasn't really something I was pursuing full time. It just kind of, I would sneak out of the office into the elevator bank and take a call and, try to set something up. And, I'd run down the stairwell and try to take another call. Right. And kind of was doing them on the side. And I was starting to think, maybe this is something. But, my job was so demanding that it really wasn't something I could do full time.
It was a side hustle at first.
Yeah.
And at what point then, did you at what point decide to focus on it full time? Or is it still something you do, and as you said, going back and forth between full-time work and then working on this full time?
So now I'm fully dedicated to it. It was maybe 2.5 years after that. So I had a few different jobs at this company, and after about 3.5 to 4 years, it became time to move on. I kind of felt I didn't have a future at that company. There was nowhere for me to grow, and I just decided that, if I'm going to do it, it's now or never, right? And I had moved to California, and I was in the Bay Area, and that was not working for me at all. I really just didn't gel up there, and I started coming down to LA just a little bit here and there, and I just loved it. I felt it was so open and welcoming, and, it kind of, the proverbial expletive hit the fan at the job I was at, and some things happened that just really solidified my decision. It really was not optional for me to stay anymore. I was very unhappy there. So I moved out of that job, and I quit my job, and I moved to LA in the same week. And I just was like, all right, well, guess I don't have a job anymore, so I guess I'm doing this now. And it was a conscious decision, but it was time.
So how soon was it after you moved that you did your first event there, your first Five Senses Tastings event?
Like 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
It was nuts, Elayne.
Wow.
Totally nuts.
Was that good, though, that you had that pressure or was there pressure? I don't want to project that. Was there pressure to sort of, get it up and started? Because as you said, this was now your full-time focus. The job was gone.
Well, yes, but I mean, it happened. I didn't even have it when I moved to LA. It happened because I went to this networking event at Diane von Furstenberg's, the DVF store at an outside mall near Beverly Hills, and the store manager kind of walked around to all of us and gave us her card and said, I'm always open to talking about stuff. And I said, well, I have stuff that I want to talk to you about. So we got on the phone and she basically said, can you come in and do this in 2 weeks? And I said, no, sorry, I need a little more time. I have live musicians I have to put together. So we decided to do it, a month after that. And it just, I just could not believe my luck. I was sort of, pinch me, is this real?
Well, I think that's a great story, first of all. But I think it's luck. But then as they say, what luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So in that situation where you were able to say, actually, I do have something to, share with you or talk to you about or pitch to you, however you stated it, and then her being interested in it. So you were sort of prepared with this thing that you had started before or had an idea for before when she came with that opportunity, which created the luck. Yeah. And so you didn't decide to say, or you didn't decide not to say anything. You could have just taken the card and thought, oh, okay, or been fearful. So just sharing that for people listening to know when that opportunity comes, whether you know how it was going to turn out or not, say what you have or what you're up to.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because, growing up, I left home when I was 12. I went to boarding school by choice. I was not sent away. And, this was before we had cell phones. This was before email. And so I wrote letters. My whole family, we wrote letters. We would have scheduled phone calls every week or however much it was. And, I followed up with everybody because if I didn't have any friends, any family. Like it was part of my experience as a human to actively to reach out to people and share something. And I when I see my old letters, we actually talked about things, like actual things, emotions and stuff, and we weren't afraid to share that. And so I think it's very natural in me just to try and initiate conversation with somebody.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's paid off.
Yeah, I mean, not always. It's like when you're auditioning, you do 100 auditions, you get called back for one. I mean, I've had 100 phone calls, and you get a couple. Yeah, it's totally a numbers game. And sometimes, you're at a networking event and you get 700 cards, and you send out individual emails to 692 of them, and 2 come back, and there's nothing you can do about that. You still have to make that effort.
So how do you handle when it doesn't work out? Do you keep in mind what you just said, that it's just part of the process, as a friend of mine says, no is a part of the process, and you just keep going? Yeah,
normally I eat ice cream or carbs before I do that. Right. But, I have learned that, I learned early on as an opera singer, rejection is just like normal. And there does get to be a point where you really can't handle it anymore. And then you just have to be good to yourself, and you just have to say, you know what, it's not the day today. I had one of those nights last night. I was at a networking event and I just had nothing to give. I didn't. So I stayed on the sideline, talked to one person, and had a wonderful evening and learned more about that one person. And I think you can learn from every experience, even if you literally can't do anything today. Take yourself out to a museum. Open up a cooking magazine if you're a dentist. Like, you'll learn something. You just will somehow. So no moment is lost. You just don't force it. If you can't be a certain person that you need to be in a given situation, take yourself out of that. Go somewhere you can be.
I love that. I might have to put that one up on my wall somewhere. Have to remember that, because sometimes, and just speaking for myself, there might be a guilt associated with feeling like I can't be in the moment what I feel like I need to be. Say it's in your example, if it were at an event and I'm thinking I should be, fill in the blank. I should be talking to everyone. I should be this, but for whatever reason, it's just not there that night. But to your point, how about doing something different, connecting with just one person, which is what I usually end up doing, 1 or 2 people as opposed to the big group. Or if it's something of maybe not going to that event and doing something else that really, lifts me up in that moment.
Well, and one thing I've learned in LA, especially, I found it very interesting to have, 3 major city experiences within the span of 2 years, from New York City to San Francisco Bay Area to down here. And I assume that this is the way it is becoming around the country, is that, those sort of business card pushers are like, that's out of style now.
Right.
It is about those one-on-one connections. And especially as someone who has a concept that's weird, like I don't have a tangible product that I can show people and say, this will make your life better, or a service that, even if you say to someone, I'm a massage therapist, even if you do something totally different, they have a conceptual understanding of what that means.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I'm doing, though not terribly difficult, is still completely new. And so if I try to, shove my business card at people and tell them I'm an event composer and I blah, 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 they're going to lose me. Unless they're in the space, right? And there are some, they're in the space, like right there to receive what you have to give. If not, ask them what they do, then talk about dogs, then talk about your latest trip. And eventually, if it's right, it'll come around to what you do and they'll already like you.
Right. Find out more about them.
It's about trying to make an acquaintance or a friend,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
And that's easier done one-on-one. And yeah, don't be afraid to leave someone side at a networking event or anywhere that's just not giving you anything,
Right.
I think we're all old enough to make that decision now, like leave the party. If you're done, leave the party.
Right. Don't take it personal or make it personal.
Right. And I think I finally learned not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone is my cup of tea. Good Lord. So, that's okay.
Right. Exactly. So now tell us what a 5 senses tasting event is like. I'm sure all of them are a little bit different, but what is it? Yeah. What's the experience like?
Well, there are 2 different formats. So one is our signature music tasting and the other is called the masked experience. So a signature music tasting is kind of along the lines of what I was talking about previously, how the company got started. Events really where we're trying to give you a menu, a flight of different types of music. So there's always a story, a thread, an occasion, a person that you're celebrating. So let's say, recently, well, in March, I guess it wasn't so recently, we did a Women's History Month event, right? So we wanted to feature all women composers, happened to be all women artists too. That was, of course, totally on purpose, but, and female winemakers and chocolatiers. And so we put together a tasting menu where we kind of took various themes that seemed to come out after we were talking with the winemaker about the wines, and just it always seems to me that it comes out and it delivers itself to me. Like I'm never searching for it. It just comes out and says, this is the story that needs to be told. It just kind of comes out. Mm-hmm. And so then I put together, however many acts, 1, 2, it's usually 3 or 4 acts of music, wine, cheese, and chocolate. And then I start putting together the music. And I always want to have a nice mix of music, but not too much, not too little. And it all has to fit the story, and then the pairings have to go together. So the music and the wine very much complement one another. It's not just randomly picked music. There's, melodic, harmonic, or things within the music, or stories about the poet or about the composer that we link back to the winemaker and the wine. So it's all very cohesive. And usually it's emceed by me and the winemaker or the sommelier or chef or someone like that. And so people come in and they sit down, and it's, not put your hands in your lap and be quiet, but kind of take this moment and allow your senses to get in deep, mm-hmm. Allow yourself to be here. Don't feel like you have to be anywhere else. And so that's the classical music experience. And then the masked experience takes that a little bit farther. We have less music, but we have more in-depth exploration of the music. So you're actually blindfolded, and then you're asked to taste just with your ears. So we'll play you a piece of music. Again, it's all live musicians. And you're asked just to taste with your ears. You have no other stimuli in front of you. And then you take off your mask and you're given your food and your drink and your sight back and your sense of touch and everything. And then we play the piece of music again. And we ask you to think about how your senses perceive things differently. Now that you are able to, have all of them in concert with one another, whereas previously you're just isolating your sense of sound. And this isn't unlike what are called, I think, dinners in the dark, where you're blindfolded and you eat. But, isolating that sense of sound is completely new. Again, it's really about bringing the sense that we tend to forget to remember back into the foreground and saying this is a sense that you can actually really engage with.
Wow, those both sound amazing. And how have, or I should say, in what ways have you worked with different people in creating those events? Has it mostly been for occasions, as you mentioned, Women's History Month, or is it also locations like Diane von Furstenberg stores, or is it a mixture of clients that come to you for these events?
It's definitely a mixture. I love working with, winemakers and wineries. I find that really rewarding, and it's sort of a natural fit. You kind of don't have to convince anyone of that. Like, it just makes sense, right?
Right.
But we work with lots of different people. I like working with, whether it's an institute of higher education like UCLA or, Barnard College where I went, or maybe a hospital or something, but putting together something for a small group of people, up to about 40 people. Maybe it's high-end donors. Maybe it's a group of CEOs coming in from all across the world to talk about, advances in bone marrow medicine or something like that. And creating this experience. I mean, everyone has to eat. Everyone has a networking event, but creating something that's actually meaningful.
Right.
Where you can really allow yourself to get into why you're doing this, who you're celebrating, why you're all here, and allow your senses to get involved. So, yeah.
I was just going to say meaningful and memorable.
Yeah.
It exactly. Sounds like something that people would be talking about for a while. I went to this event and we were blindfolded and then and telling the story. So it's really you're creating experiences for people.
Well, and that's the thing is, we don't need any more stuff in today's world.
Right.
People are purging left, right, and center and donating to Goodwill because they just have too much stuff. Mm-hmm. What we're all looking for is that meaning in life right now. I know that sounds sort of esoteric and granola, but it's actually true. People want to be able to hold on to something that becomes part of their identity, and buying a new lamp or a new phone is exciting for a couple days, and then it just becomes an object, right? Whereas something like this is with you for life. Like, honestly, it's with you for life. You will know a piece of music or know a taste that you had or a memory that was triggered for the rest of your life. It's not an exaggeration. Excellent. So that's what we're trying to do.
Excellent. Now, I noticed on your website that you have an impressive list of artists featured. Do you represent those artists, or how do you work with them? Or is it just you let them know when you have an event then that they're suited for?
Right. So I don't represent any of them. They are all freelancers. Some of them may have their own manager, and I am not an artist management company at all. So I came to LA knowing about 2 or 3 people. And 2 of them happen to be artists, or musicians. So through them and through meeting people, I grew my list entirely organically. And the reason that I have a wider list than you might expect is because I don't use any preformed bands, right? So I need musicians who are flexible enough to play between 3 to 5 to 8 different genres of music in a given night. Someone who can play opera and then switch over to some bluegrass and then, maybe a classical piece and a tango piece. And those are going to be the top-notch artists, few and far between. And, it also means they have to be excited about, stretching their own capabilities to something maybe they haven't done before.
See, I was thinking, I didn't realize that. I thought you would have several different artists from different who perform different types of music come in, but this sounds even more extraordinary. You have usually one particular artist or band that performs different types of music.
No, it is usually a group of artists. Maybe they have a few specialties, and they come in together, and we always rehearse beforehand. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I have on there, a fantastic flamenco guitarist who I may never be able to hire again because he's traveling the world. But not every event is going to be right for a flamenco guitarist, so I don't hire him for everything. I hire him for the events where that is needed, and then I ask him also, hey, can you play a jazz piece, and can you do that tango piece with violin, and then you and I will do a piece together. And so he'll play 4 different pieces throughout the night. Maybe 2 are flamenco and then 2 are something else. Mm-hmm. And it might take that person or someone else a little extra time to get something in their fingers or in their voice, but they come to five senses, or when I talk to them, they're intrigued by the idea of actually learning something new, and expanding their own repertoire.
Now, I've seen that you've said that art in all its forms has a singular capacity to transform us. So I was curious, in what ways would you say art has transformed you?
In ways it's transformed me, I mean, you hope as an artist that you get maybe 5 to 10 moments in your life that completely transform you. I've had 2 so far. Maybe I'll have some more. And that just means that you get, I think, to a place of the most profound understanding in yourself, even if it's for a split second, but where like everything makes complete and utter sense in like the biggest, most universal terms possible. And maybe you get a couple of those in your life. Maybe you don't.
Are those moments connected to art or music, or do you mean in general those moments? Okay.
For me, I think that loving music is something that is innate to all of us. I don't think you'd find a baby who was like, I hate music. And starts crying when you put on, Mozart or Ella Fitzgerald, right?
Right.
But, I have a friend who, when the towers fell in New York City, went downtown with his violin and just started playing, because that's all he knew how to do. And everybody flocked to him because there was nothing else to do besides try and find solace in something. And there's something about the vibrations of melody and harmony and simple melody that just gets you to your soul in a way that, a piece of cheese or a glass of beer just can't. It can't do that. It is impossible.
Mm-hmm. What would you say that entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
Oh, good Lord. To listen to my intuition, and that's pot calling kettle black, because I don't always do that, but it's taught me that I should. As I mentioned before, to see every moment as a potential learning experience. Even if you have to take on a second job because you aren't making enough money right now. Okay, well, what does that teach you? It teaches you to be more efficient in the time that you have left, right? You think, I don't want to have to do this. Well, it taught you something massive, so take advantage of that. That's kind of it. I think you can learn a lot about yourself by the way you feel in moments of struggle. So it's tough. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Just keep going. It's not the be all and end all. Like, if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean you failed. That's a huge one. I would say, there have been times, right now, for example, I am working another job because I need a little extra income. It happens. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's feast or famine, right? So, and I spent a lot of time sort of whipping myself, thinking, well, that just means you failed. Well, that's not useful.
Right. And it can be a both and as opposed to either or. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I guess just trying not to be so disappointed in yourself when it doesn't go the way you think it's supposed to go. Maybe the way that it is going right now is actually totally the right way, and you just didn't see it at first. So try that. And that might not be right either, but just try not to, beat yourself up about the path that you're on right now. Just accept that is your path for right now, because it has to be, and find ways that you can move that along in the best way you can towards a bigger goal.
For me, when I'm in those moments, to speak to just the advice that you just gave, when I'm in those moments, I try my best to say, okay, what am I supposed to be learning in this time or in this moment or this, if things aren't, especially if I'm feeling like, as you said, things aren't going as I thought or as I hoped, or I'm having to do something else to support the business that I didn't want to have to do, or just whatever is happening. It's sort of, what can I learn in this moment? There has to be something.
Exactly.
Yeah, not forcing the lesson, but just being open to it and not getting caught up, speaking for myself, and just feeling like it's a miserable situation as opposed to a learning experience.
Yeah. And I think, the other part of your question about, what has it taught me about being a woman? I think, and every day more so, in today's world, it's our duty as women to stand up for ourselves pretty much no matter what.
Yep.
I had this like ridiculously silly thing happen the other day where 3 women, myself included, were in a group and all of our names begin with K. And some person, a man, said, well, there's got to be a dirty joke in there somewhere. And I just thought, no, like there just doesn't have to be, and absolutely not, no way. And would you have said exactly the same thing if it had been like Kevin, Carl, and Kenneth?
No, right.
No, you wouldn't have, because it's 100% inappropriate and dumb. Like, it's just a dumb comment. Shut your mouth. Don't say anything. And so, I didn't say anything because this was like the first moment I had been in contact with all of these people. And you just think, well, am I going to make a big scene? But kind of we need to. Like, right. We kind of start needing to call people on their BS all the time. Of course, that means we're not doing anything else because it happens all the time. But if that's our new normal, we're screwed.
Right. And there's all kinds of ways we can call people on there, There's all kinds of ways you can do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm lucky in LA, there's so many female entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs here doing such amazing things. It isn't weird anymore, and that's great. But I think when you go into more established, older industries, banking, technology, I've been in technology, so, it happens. It's just kind of goes that way. It's whenever, it's how people talk. And, you just have to kind of say, you know what, actually, that's not it. That's not really appropriate. Don't appreciate that. Let's move on. Exactly.
Right. It's a way that's perfect. It's like, I'm not going to make a big deal about it, but that's stupid. We're going to move on. That's stupid. So what would you say, Kala, in closing, that if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Well, I have to give it back to my mommy. She said to me something when I was going through a very tough time at my old job and looking to leave that has stayed with me and will stay with me forever. And she said, I know it's scary where you are now, but it's so much scarier if you stay. So, or I guess not moving on is scarier, right? And she knows how I feel about that comment. So, she is thanked all the time. But she's so supportive. I mean, she'll read a press release for me, and then when I'm moping around and sobbing, she'll tell me to, she'll love me for a little bit and then say, okay, now it's time. Okay, get up, go outside, stop being a blubbery blubber person. Just go do stuff. Come on, you want to. But I just always remember that, you can be scared in a moment. Especially for those of your listeners who might be considering leaving a corporate job or something that makes them, it's not fulfilling them, Yeah, it's really scary. I'm terrified every day. Literally every day I'm terrified. I'm going to fail, that it's not going to work, that I'm going to be broke. But it would be so much more scary to go back to what I had and know that and live that life.
Mm-hmm. Now tell us how we can support you. Of course, I'll have links to everything, as I mentioned, to your website, but tell everyone where they can find you, any social media you want to share, or anything you want to let us know that you're up to.
Well, thank you. So, I am in LA, but I am able to travel and compose events around the country, and I also do starting some music and wine tasting classes. So those are going to be a lot more lower budget and kind of more versatile. So, if anyone wants to kind of experience something new and is interested in music and wine tasting class, they can definitely reach out to me. So my website is 5sensestastings.com. So the letters FIVE, senses, and tasting with an S.com. That's also how you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram with the number 5 Senses Tastings. If you want to send us an email, it's just info@5sensestastings.com, or find us on social media and send us a DM over there. We have it coming up in the Bay Area on August 5th in San Carlos at Domenico Winery. That's all over our social media too. That's what's coming up next.
Excellent. Kala, thank you so much for sharing, especially so much of your story with us and just the journey and the ups and the downs and the things that we all face, and for being so open about all of that.
No, thank you. Thank you. It's sometimes, you want to hide. It's impossible to hide. I think when you're an entrepreneur,
Exactly.
it's so much a part of who we are. It's not part of your story.
And I think people fortunately are becoming more, not everybody, but I do think most people are becoming more open just about their true experiences. I mean, for me, it's one of the reasons I wanted to start the show, because I wanted to know it can't be just me that's going through this.
Nope, it's not.
It's not. Now, before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
Well, I mean, I guess, I hate to repeat myself, but I think, when you are in a place where you are not content, don't rush out of it, because, you don't just want to rush out of it to get out of it. Try and plan, but whatever leap you take, you will figure it out. The floor will rise to meet you, or something like that. Set yourself up. If you know that you can't stand your job anymore, start saving immediately. Save as much as you can. Figure out how you can have a 3-month backup plan, and get out. Look for something new. Don't be afraid to try something new. You will always be okay. Mm-hmm. But if you don't try that thing, you'll always wonder what if, and you may find it was the perfect thing. You may find it wasn't the perfect thing, but at least in today's world, it's okay to keep trying new careers for as long as we live. So yeah, plan a little bit and then jump off.
That's right. Kala, thank you so much. Hold on just a moment. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kala. To find out more about her and about 5 Senses Tastings and how to get in touch with them, go to supportissexypodcast.com and just search Kala, Kala, and her show notes page will pop up with all of the links and resources and things that we mentioned within this episode. Supportissexypodcast.com and just search Kala. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you. If this is your first time listening or your 290-something time listening, I am so happy to have you here. What I would love and what would be a big help to me and to the show, if you love it, please make sure you leave a review wherever you're listening, especially if it's on Apple Podcasts, because that really helps to move the show up to the top and get more people to listen to it, which is my goal, right? Reminding as many women as possible that having it all doesn't mean doing it all alone, and that support is sexy. And your reviews help me to be able to continue to do that. So if you love the show, I'd love a 5-star review. Any feedback is appreciated, but I'd love a 5-star review, and I'd love to hear from you. And I've started reading reviews every week, something I'm going to do each Wednesday. I've made a note to myself to remember to do that. I'm reading them anyway, but reading them on the podcast, I should say, because I want to celebrate you in the same way that you celebrate Support is Sexy. I truly appreciate you. All right, I look forward to connecting with you tomorrow. And until then, you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.